They show you the brochure, a beach, a smile, a coffee steaming in slow motion beside a sunrise. No more alarms, no more deadlines, no more grind. Retirement, sold to you as the end of suffering, the beginning of freedom. But behind the curtain of leisure lies a quieter truth, one no one talks about. The emptiness, the disorientation, the quiet that doesn't bring peace, but unease. For some, retirement feels less like liberation and more like exile from meaning itself. You spent decades preparing to live. Now that it's here, why does it feel like life has left the room? We were taught to believe retirement is the prize at the end of sacrifice. But what if that prize is an illusion? What if the long-promised joy of retirement isn't freedom, but withdrawal? A withdrawal from purpose, from struggle, from self-definition. Erich Fromm once warned us, there is a vast difference between having a life and being alive. We live in a society that teaches us how to accumulate money, achievements, status, but never how to be. Retirement then becomes the final chapter in a book we never truly understood. And Viktor Frankl reminded us that man's deepest need is not comfort but meaning. So when the noise of work and identity fades, when no one needs you and the calendar is blank, the silence doesn't feel like peace. It feels like a loss. What if we've spent our whole lives chasing a version of happiness that doesn't exist? What if retirement isn't the end of suffering, but the beginning of a new kind of suffering no one warned us about? And more importantly, who designed it this way? Retirement feels like a natural phase of life. A cultural constant like childhood, adulthood, and old age. But what if it isn't? What if retirement, in its modern form, didn't evolve with us, but was engineered for us? To understand the lie, we must examine its architecture. In the late 19th century, German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck introduced one of the world's first formal retirement systems. But it wasn't born from a desire to help the elderly live freely. It was a tool of order. The retirement age was set at 70, when the average life expectancy was under 50. It wasn't a gift. It was a calculated promise few would live to collect. Fast forward to post-World War II America. The industrial boom demanded a workforce that was not creative, but compliant. Not rebellious, but reliable. The 40-hour work week, the suburban ideal, the neatly timed life from graduation to retirement. These weren't organic milestones. They were policy decisions, strategies, systems. The modern working life was designed, not to cultivate the soul, but to manage bodies, to turn human potential into predictable output. Michel Foucault would call this biopower, the state's subtle control over life itself. Not through force, but through norms, through scheduling, categorizing, incentivizing. You didn't choose this life structure. You inherited it like a uniform. You didn't resist it because it was never presented as optional. You were told that retirement is your reward for contributing to society. But that's only half the truth. Retirement is also your reward for not questioning the system. It's the end point of a life spent moving along invisible rails, rails laid down by interests that benefit from your predictability, not your freedom. Think about how early we're taught to submit to the timeline. School prepares us for college. College prepares us for work. Work is framed as sacrifice for later ease. Work hard now so you can enjoy life later. But what happens when that later comes and the enjoyment never arrives? What if you were trained to endure, but never trained to live? Michel de Certeau described modern existence as the passive consumption of life designs made by others. We do not make our lives. We select from pre-packaged templates. You were not asked who you wanted to be. You were told what success looks like. And retirement was painted as its final achievement, a peaceful ending. But a peaceful ending to what? A life that was never yours to begin with? Here's the uncomfortable truth. The system needed you to be productive, not fulfilled. It needed you scheduled, not spontaneous. It needed you to see rest as a distant reward, not a daily necessity. And retirement? It was the carrot dangled at the edge of the treadmill, a promise to keep you running long after your purpose had faded. When we peel back the layers, we see that retirement wasn't built for human flourishing. It was built to maintain societal rhythm, to keep the machinery of productivity oiled. It's not a door to freedom, it's the release lever after a life in captivity. The tragedy is not that we retire too late. The tragedy is that we begin our lives waiting for it. But if the path to retirement was never ours to choose, what else in our lives has been curated without our consent? What other freedoms were silently traded for comfort, for obedience, for the illusion of progress, and most importantly, what would it look like to reclaim them? We are told that retirement is a beginning, a time of rest, travel, and finally doing what we want. But for many, it feels more like an ending, not the closing of a chapter, but the closing of the book itself. After the farewell party and the final paycheck, there is silence, a space that was once filled with meetings, goals, roles, now empty. And, in that silence, a question appears. Who am I now? For decades, identity was bound to function. I am a teacher. I am an engineer. I am a manager. But these were never who we were. They were what we did. The problem is, we believed them anyway, because society told us to. Carl Jung warned of this trap. He believed that the first half of life is about establishing the ego, building a persona, a role in the world. But the second half, Jung said, is the journey inward. A time for individuation, reclaiming the self beneath the social mask. Retirement should be that invitation. But most aren't ready to answer it, because most don't even know the mask was there. Erik Erikson described a final psychological battle in old age, integrity versus despair. It's the moment where we reflect on life and ask, was it worth it? Did we live with purpose, or just go through the motions until the machine spit us out? When your value has always been measured by output, productivity, and external validation, removing those metrics feels like erasing your existence. The phone stops ringing. The inbox stays empty. You're no longer needed in the world you helped build. And that realization doesn't bring freedom. It brings grief. One man described retirement like walking off a cliff. He had prepared financially, planned his days, even picked up hobbies, but nothing filled the gap. He missed being important. He missed being seen. And worst of all, he realized he didn't know what he wanted, because for 40 years, he had never asked. Another woman said she felt betrayed. She had done everything right, saved, sacrificed, delayed her dreams. But when the moment came, there was no transformation. Just time, and too much of it. Time to think, time to doubt, time to notice the parts of herself she had abandoned just to be successful. But this isn't universal. In Okinawa, there is no word for retirement. Instead, they use the term ikigai, a reason to wake up in the morning. Purpose isn't something you one day discard. It evolves with age. Elders remain integral, not obsolete. They teach, they contribute, they belong. In these cultures, the transition from work is not an exit, it's a shift in form, not in value. The Western model, by contrast, isolates the elder. It treats age as a decline, not a distillation. The irony is brutal. We spend our youth sacrificing time for money, only to spend our age wondering what to do with the time we finally bought. This is the psychological violence of a system that confuses function with identity. That builds self-worth on productivity and then pulls the floor out from under us when we stop producing. So, we return to the question, who are you when no one is watching? When there is no title before your name, no paycheck behind your time? It's a question many face too late. But perhaps it's one we were always meant to ask, not at the end of the road, but at every turn along the way. Because the final chapter of life isn't written for us. It's ours to create. if we remember that we were never just our jobs. We were the consciousness moving beneath it all, waiting for the silence to finally speak. We are told that comfort is the reward, that after a life of labor, peace is the prize. A soft chair, a predictable routine, days that drift without pressure, without deadlines. But what if this comfort is not freedom? What if it's a carefully constructed cage? In Brave New World, Aldous Huxley warned of a society that wouldn't need to be controlled by force, because it would be controlled by pleasure. Discomfort was eliminated. Challenge was medication. Every citizen is sedated by synthetic satisfaction. And in the absence of suffering, something vital died. The will to question, to resist, to grow. Retirement promises this same paradise. Tumty. Life without the burden of struggle. But what looks like rest can quickly become rot. The human psyche is forged in resistance. We are wired to solve, to strive, to overcome. Take away the mountain, and you take away the climber. Without challenge, the mind begins to atrophy, not just biologically but spiritually. Depression among retirees is not just common, it's expected. Not because they are weak, but because they were told that comfort was the goal. And when they reached it, they found it empty. Studies have shown that brain activity declines sharply in individuals who stop engaging in meaningful tasks. Without novelty or purpose, even memory fades faster. The spirit becomes dull, not from exhaustion, but from disuse. It turns out, we don't age because we grow old. We grow old because we stop engaging with life. Contrast that with those who defy the narrative. A Japanese doctor is still practicing medicine at 95. A German philosopher writing essays into his 90s. A woman in her 80s teaching children to paint, passing on color and life to a new generation. These are not exceptions. They are reminders. That meaning is not found in withdrawal. It's found in continued contribution. Retirement sold us a lie, that comfort is the destination. But real peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from facing the necessary struggle and growing stronger through it. A garden left untouched does not bloom. It decays. The same is true of the human spirit. This isn't an attack on rest. Rest is sacred when it follows effort. But a life of permanent rest is not peace. It's paralysis. The same system that demanded your labor for decades now offers you sedation. Not because it cares about your joy, but because a comfortable person is a quiet one, a disengaged one, a non-threatening one. Ask yourself, was the pursuit of comfort ever about your happiness, or was it about neutralizing your will? There is a reason the elders who stay alive inside are not the ones who stopped. They are the ones who found new ways to start. Because in the end, it is not the struggle we should fear. It is the stillness that follows when we stop believing we have anything left to give. We live in a world obsessed with happiness. It's marketed in glossy brochures, sold through wellness apps, promised in retirement plans, a vision of smiling faces on beach chairs, clinking glasses under the sun. But what if this vision isn't happiness at all? Just a sedative illusion. Slavoj. Zizek once argued that modern ideology no longer tells us to sacrifice or obey, it tells us to enjoy. But the demand to be happy, always happy, becomes its own form of oppression. When happiness is redefined as comfort, convenience, and consumption, we end up chasing a mirage. We don't live, we shop. We don't reflect, we scroll. And when emptiness catches up to us, we're told it's our fault for not being positive enough. Western retirement culture is the final act of this myth. After decades of work, you're handed the promise, now finally you will be happy. No more responsibilities, no more alarms, just leisure. But for many, this so-called paradise begins to feel more like a desert. The rest they longed for becomes restlessness. The freedom they were sold becomes disconnected. Because the script they were given left out something vital: meaning. Contrast this with older, richer visions of human flourishing. Aristotle called it eudaimonia, not happiness in the shallow sense, but the fulfillment of one's potential through virtue, action, and purpose. Life was good not when it was easy, but when it was meaningful. Epicurus, so often misread, didn't preach indulgence, but ataraxia, a serene state born not from excess, but from simplicity, friendship, and inner balance. Buddhist psychology points to the same truth. The constant grasping for pleasure only amplifies suffering. Real liberation comes not from getting what we want, but from understanding the nature of wanting itself. Happiness, in this view, is not a destination. It's a byproduct of insight, discipline, and presence. Yet modern retirement culture ignores all of this. It tells you that you've earned the right to stop striving, that you deserve a life of frictionless pleasure. But the human soul is not wired for passivity. We are built to pursue, to reflect, to grow. When those are stripped away in the name of ease, the result isn't happiness, it's disorientation. In many traditional societies, elders weren't removed from life's purpose. They were embedded in it. They became the storytellers, the wisdom keepers, the moral compass for future generations. Their value was not in what they had consumed, but in what they continued to offer. But the modern model isolates the elderly. They're placed in homes, padded with entertainment, distanced from relevance. And we wonder why so many feel invisible, aimless, unfulfilled. It's not that retirement itself is wrong. It's that the myth surrounding it is hollow. We have mistaken the absence of pain for the presence of joy. But joy is not a passive state. It is an active process. It's cultivated, not granted. And more often than not, it's born not from escaping discomfort, but from confronting it, growing through it, and offering something back. So the question isn't, are you happy now that you've retired? The real question is, what have you redefined happiness to mean? Is it mere comfort? Or is it the deeper, harder pursuit of a life that still matters? Because when happiness is no longer a product to consume, but a path to walk, retirement doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can become the beginning of your most conscious chapter. The soul does not crave stillness. It longs to move, to deepen, to become. Retirement, as it's commonly portrayed, is not a natural conclusion, but a cultural interruption. A pause, in the soul's unfolding masquerading as a reward. Throughout history, those who left their mark late in life did so not by stepping back, but by leaning in. Carl Jung published some of his most transformative psychological work after 60. Viktor Frankl, after surviving the Holocaust, continued lecturing and writing into his 80s. Anna Mary Robertson Moses, better known as Grandma Moses, began painting at 78. She didn't retire into silence. She exploded into color. These people didn't resist aging. They resisted irrelevance. They understood something the modern world forgets. The spirit doesn't grow obsolete. It sharpens. The older mind may lose speed, but it gains perspective. The hands may tire, but the heart can burn brighter than ever. The tragedy isn't in growing old. It's in believing that old age means disconnection, that your value diminishes once you stop producing capital, that your time must now be filled with distraction instead of contribution. This is the lie, wrapped in slogans about leisure, wrapped in glossy promises of rest. Retirement isn't the problem, disengagement is. The final chapters of life aren't meant to be erased by comfort. They are meant to be written with urgency, with purpose, with fire. Because the soul, your deepest essence, was never designed to fade into stillness. It was built to rise, again and again. The final decades of life have often been cast as a slow fade into irrelevance, a gradual retreat from the world, a quiet exit stage left. But what if this is a profound misunderstanding? What if, instead of an ending, These years can be a crescendo, a peak of creativity, wisdom, and fulfillment, unlike any other. This is not wishful thinking. It is a call to reclaim the narrative. Viktor Frankl, a man who faced the abyss and survived, dedicated his life to understanding how meaning shapes our existence. His logotherapy teaches that meaning is not a passive state to stumble upon. It is an active pursuit, a choice made every day. It's the reason some find purpose in their final chapters. Even after loss, pain, and decline, they do not wait for happiness to arrive. They create it by aligning their actions with what truly matters. Similarly, the Japanese concept of ikigai, a reason for being, offers a compass for living fully at any age. Ikigai is the intersection where passion meets mission, profession, and vocation. It is the fuel for the soul, a reason to rise even in the earliest hours. It reminds us that life's worth is not measured by years or output, but by the depth of engagement with what moves us. The myth that retirement is a reward, that rest is the ultimate goal, is not just false, it is dangerous. It robs us of our most conscious, most vital years by convincing us to withdraw when we should lean in. It encourages passivity at a time when reflection and creativity could reach their highest expression. What if the last act of life is the most profound? What if instead of winding down we rise up? What if aging does not mean fading, but becoming more fully ourselves, freed from the distractions of earlier life, able to channel wisdom, resilience, and vision? This is the new philosophy of the last act. It offers a lens that transforms fear into opportunity, despair into hope, inertia into motion. Whether you are 25 or 75, the invitation is the same. To see your life's final chapters not as an end, but as a stage set for the most powerful expression of your soul. To choose meaning over comfort. To create rather than retreat. To become at last fully alive.